Soccer AM has now been on the air for 25 years, albeit in many different forms. Up until the age of about 11, Soccer AM during the Chamberlain and Lovejoy era was part of my Saturday morning routine, with groundbreaking features such as the Crossbar Challenge, Skill Skool, and the now rather archaic-looking scantily clad Soccerettes, which somehow managed to remain part of the show up until 2015. The show has been suffering a slow and rather painful death, particularly since Tim Lovejoy's departure, and its popularity with viewers is reflected in the routine cuts to its runtime. Now hosted by amateur Supans lookalike John Fendley and the third most detestable man in football Jimmy Bullard, I'd rather spend my Saturday morning manually inserting disease-ridden needles into my eyes than watching the drivel Sky Sports is currently serving up. I'm therefore not sure whether Skill Skool is still a feature on the show, though I highly doubt it is. We all need a small dose of nostalgia at times, and subscriber Casper Jorgensen recently suggested that I take a look at 7 former Soccer AM Skill Skool participants. So I've dipped into the archives, but decided to take it a little further, taking a look at 7 famous Skill Skool battles and where each player has ended up. Without further ado, I'll get started. Matthew Briggs versus Danny Huth. Matthew Briggs is a name that will be familiar to many of you since he held the record as the youngest player to make a Premier League appearance for 12 years. You know, one of those rubbish records that pretends football started in 1992 and before that there was just an abyss where people looked at spherical balls inflated with air and didn't know what to do with them. Briggs' Premier League debut came in May 2007 when he was only 16 years and 65 days old, breaking a record previously set by Aaron Lennon at Leeds in 2003. Briggs was well built for his age and an England youth international, so there were high hopes for him at Craven Cottage. He would have to wait more than 3 years before playing his next game for Fulham following a string of loan moves, and he was released by the Cottagers, having played only 30 games for the club in 2014. Briggs has since dropped into the non-league game, most recently signing for National League Southside Dartford in March 2020, now aged 29. He lost his record as the youngest player of the Premier League era last season when Harvey Elliott made his Premier League debut, also for Fulham. The man Briggs was up against in Soccer AM Skill Skool was also a youth international, although Danny Huth represented his native Netherlands. A talented forward, although Huth never got a game for Fulham, he left the club for Ajax in 2012, where he made his debut against Real Madrid in the Champions League. Huth won that Skill Skool, and deservedly so, and the 29-year-old now plays in the MLS with San Jose Earthquakes. Nathan Redmond versus Akwasi Asante. Another famous Skill Skool battle between an Englishman and a Dutchman, Nathan Redmond, took on Akwasi Asante in Birmingham City Skill Skool. Redmond was long considered the shining light in Birmingham's academy, and his flair stood out in the battle between the two, although I'm not sure who was the winner since this Skill Skool came during the post-cheer for who was the best Soccer AM era. Redmond broke into Birmingham's first team in 2010 and was snapped up by Premier League side Norwich City in 2013 for a potential £3.2 million. Following 2 relegations and 1 promotion at Carrow Road, Redmond sealed a return to the Premier League with Southampton, this time setting the Saints back a reported £10 million. Redmond is still at St Mary's now, aged 26, where he won the Players' Player and Fans' Player of the Year awards last season, and he has been capped once by England in 2017. Leggy frontman Akwasi Asante only ever played once for Birmingham in a Europa League game in Madeira. He has since fallen into a category of player who seemed to be too good for the non-league game, but perhaps not quite good enough to play in the EFL. Asante has struggled at Kidderminster and Grimsby Town, but he scored 33 goals in just 74 games for Solihull Moors in the National League and National League North. Aged 27, he joined National League North side Chester in 2019, where he has since scored 20 goals in 19 league games, putting him 3rd in the division scoring charts. Milan Lukovic versus Jordan Hibbert. Whilst I've tried to include some players in this 7 who made it in the professional game, the vast majority did not. That's a reminder, should it be needed, that being a good freestyler and being a good footballer are 2 very different things, and anyone familiar with the inner workings of the academy system knows that the most skillful youngsters very often aren't the ones who go on to have the best careers. Chelsea's academy has been a breeding ground for fine young talent in recent times, but their Skill Skool participants are not their most noted alumni. Slovakian wide man Milan Lukovic joined Chelsea at the age of 14, but he departed 7 years later, having failed to register a senior appearance. Lukovic's best seasons in English football came during his time with Walsall, both on loan and after joining the Saddlers on a permanent basis, but he left Walsall after a single season following an approach from Portsmouth. Lukovic now plays for FC Baník Ostrava in the Czech First League, aged 27. His Skill Skool opponent, who won by the narrowest of margins, was Jordan Hibbert. The 6-foot central midfielder left Chelsea for Barnsley in 2008, and he has since had spells playing in Portugal and Sweden. Aged 29, he appears to have left the sport behind now, not having had a club since leaving Dulwich Hamlet during the 2014-15 campaign. Britt Assombalonga versus Stephen Hamilton Forbes. 4th place takes us to Vicarage Road and a battle between Britt Assombalonga and Stephen Hamilton Forbes. Britt Assombalonga was born in Kinshasa, the son of a former Zaire international footballer, but he moved to England when he was only 8 months old. Assombalonga came through the youth ranks at Watford, but only ever made 4 first-team appearances for the Hornets before being snapped up by Peterborough for £1.1 million. The DR Congo international has since joined Nottingham Forest for a potential £8 million, and most recently Middlesbrough for a club record £15 million. Assombalonga is among the most reliable goal scorers in the Championship when he's fit, but the 27-year-old is yet to reach the promised land of the Premier League. Stephen Hamilton Forbes, who sounds more like the name of a man who would have invented the fax machine in the 1800s than a Watford Academy player, hasn't been able to follow in Assombalonga's footsteps. As far as I can tell, Hamilton Forbes last played for non-league Mertham in 2016, following spells with Chesham United and Enfield Town. Just for the record, it was of course Scottish mechanic Alexander Bain who invented the fax machine, and it's that kind of information that you just won't find on other football YouTube channels. Subscribe now. Danny Ings versus Muzzy Holmes. Danny Ings perhaps isn't someone who you'd automatically associate with fancy tricks and flicks, but the Southampton striker is a talented technician. A decade ago, a teenage Ings was coming through the youth ranks at Bournemouth, where he beat teammate Muzzy Holmes in an edition of Soccer AM Skill Skool. In 2011, Ings followed his former boss Eddie Huth at Burnley, where he had 2 really difficult seasons, followed by an explosive campaign. Ings bagged 26 goals in 45 games as Burnley won promotion to the Premier League, and when the Clarets were relegated the following season, Ings was out of contract. Liverpool came calling, but injuries and strong competition limited the once-capped England international to only 25 appearances in 3 seasons at Anfield. He joined Southampton on loan last season, and permanently this season, where a tally of 15 goals in 29 games currently puts him 5th in the Premier League scoring charts. Muzzy Holmes has had a less illustrious playing career. In fact, he's the only player in this 7 of whom I know absolutely nothing about. He certainly never played a game for Bournemouth, and it would appear that he didn't remain in football at all after leaving the Cherries. Raheem Sterling versus Christian Nanetti. Queen's Park Rangers have a very respectable academy, and Raheem Sterling is perhaps the finest player to come out of the club in recent times. A very fresh-faced Raheem took part in QPR's own Skill Skool episode up against Christian Nanetti in 2010, but it was Nanetti who won on the day. Sterling was only 15 at the time, but he was already one of the hottest prospects within the English academy system, and within months, he'd been signed by Liverpool for a potential £2 million. The transfer made Sterling the most expensive 15-year-old of all time, but it took him just 2 years to make his Liverpool debut. In 2015, following 2 brilliant seasons, Sterling sought to move to Man City with the potential £49 million fee, making him the most expensive English footballer on earth at that time. Sterling has since reached yet new heights at the Etihad, particularly under Pep Guardiola, and he's now at least England's second best player, if not the best. Nanetti may have won the battle, but he didn't win the war. 3 years older than Sterling, he never broke into the QPR first team, becoming a journeyman non-league player. The Italian forward's most notable stint came with Havant and Waterlooville, where he spent 2 seasons, and he returned to Italy in 2018, now playing for Corticelli in the amateur 5th tier of Italian football. Jordan Henderson versus Nathan Luscombe. One major takeaway from this 7 would seem to be that by far the most successful Skill Skool participants have ended up at Liverpool at some stage. Ings, Henderson and Sterling are the outstanding players in this 7, all of whom have turned out at Anfield. Jordan Henderson is the only one currently at Anfield, of course, currently captaining the Reds with distinction and in with the shout of winning the PFA Player of the Year award. Henderson was born in Sunderland, and it was during his time in the Sunderland Academy that he featured in Soccer AM Skill Skool, losing to teammate Nathan Luscombe, who's 1 year his senior. Henderson went on to establish himself at the Stadium of Light under Steve Bruce before joining Liverpool for a potential £20 million. It took Henderson some time to establish himself at Anfield, inheriting the captain's armband following Steven Gerrard's departure in 2015, but he is now one of the most important midfield players in Europe. Luscombe only registered 1 first-team appearance at the Stadium of Light in a 2009 FA Cup game against Blackburn Rovers. He later spent a couple of seasons at Hartlepool United, but retired following a very brief stint with non-league Celtic Nation back in 2014. So that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, give us a like if you enjoyed the video, and as always, make sure that you are subscribed to the 22nd best football channel on YouTube, HITC Sevens.